Hello everyone, welcome to Grandparents Tales. My name is Grandparents Tales, and today I want to share a very special story with you. The story is about a woman named Helen Benwood, a strong woman and a brave grandmother whose life changed forever and mysterious night. Before she passed on her message, Helen asked me to share her story so others can learn about love, secret, forgiveness, and the strength to the beginning again. No matter your age, so settle down, open your heart, and let me tell you our story.
My name is Eloan Briarwood. I am 76 years old. I have lived most of my life in a quiet little town in northern Montana, the kind of place where people wave from their porches and sunsets stretch across open fields like warm blankets. I was a retired school librarian, widowed once, and remarried late in life to a man named Thaddeus Wren. People used to tell me I was lucky to find love again at 70. I believed them. I wanted to believe them. Before we begin this story, I want to welcome you to this channel. If you enjoy emotional and powerful stories that touch your heart and keep you thinking long after they end, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I always love knowing which part of the country you are joining me from. Now let me tell you about the night everything changed. It was late October when the air smelled like cold earth and chimney smoke. I remember because I had just finished knitting a scarf for my youngest granddaughter. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for the ticking clock above the kitchen sink. Thaddeus stood by the door wearing his heavy coat. He looked nervous, the way people look when they are hiding something big. "Eloan," he said softly, "I need you to do something strange tonight." I laughed a little. My age strange felt like normal. "What do you need?" He hesitated. "At midnight I want you to go outside and wait on the porch. Just for a little while. Don't come back in until I tell you." I frowned. "Outside. At midnight. Thaddeus, it's freezing." "Please," he said. "Trust me." Trust. That word had built my whole second marriage. After losing my first husband to cancer, I promised myself I would never settle again. Thaddeus had seemed gentle, patient, almost fragile. A retired rancher with kind hands and soft eyes. The kind of man who brought wildflowers home for no reason. So I nodded, though something inside me felt uneasy. "Fine," I said. "But you're going to explain this later." He smiled weakly and kissed my forehead. The evening passed slowly. I watched old Western reruns while he paced the living room. Every time I asked what was wrong, he gave me the same answer. "You'll understand soon." At 11:45, he turned off the television. "It's time, Eloan." My heart beat faster. I wrapped myself in my thick coat and stepped toward the front door. The wind howled outside, rattling the dry leaves across the yard. He opened the door but didn't step out with me. "Just wait here," he whispered. The porch creaked under my slippers as I stepped into the darkness. The cold bit through my coat immediately. The moon was thin, barely lighting the empty street. I turned back toward him, but the door was already closing. "Thaddeus?" "Yes." No answer. Then I heard the lock click. My stomach dropped. I knocked gently at first. "Thaddeus." "Very funny." "Me in." Silence. The minutes stretched. My breath fogged the air. I pulled my coat tighter and tried to calm myself. Maybe this was some strange surprise. A late birthday prank. But it wasn't my birthday. The house remained dark except for a faint light in the back room. I walked down the porch steps and looked through the window. I couldn't see clearly, only shadows moving. Then I heard it. A low, painful moan. Not a man's voice. A woman's. Froze. The sound came again, louder this time. Long and trembling, like someone hurting or crying. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I pressed my hands against the glass. Another shadow moved inside. 2 figures. One standing. One bent low. The moaning turned into a whisper I couldn't understand. I stepped back, suddenly dizzy. Who was inside my house? I hurried to the door and pounded harder. Thaddeus! Open the door. No response. The cold seeped into my bones. Memories of nursing homes flashed in my mind. Stories of elderly people forgotten, ignored, pushed aside once they became inconvenient. Had I made a mistake marrying again? I walked around the side of the house, my feet crunching on frost. The back window gave me a clearer view. I lifted myself slowly, my knees aching, and looked inside. My breath caught. There was a woman lying on the couch. She was older, pale, her gray hair spread across the cushion. Her mouth moved weakly, releasing that same strange moan. And standing over her was my husband. He held her hand gently. No, 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 I whispered. Who was she? Why was she in my home? And why had he locked me outside? My chest tightened with something worse than fear. Betrayal. The kind that starts quietly and then grows until it fills every corner of your heart. I stumbled backward from the window, my mind racing. Had he been lying to me all this time? Was this woman his secret? Was I the fool everyone warned me not to become? I sat down on the porch step, shivering, tears burning my eyes. I thought about my children who had told me to be careful with my new marriage. About my neighbors who said love at this age was rare but fragile. Inside, the moaning stopped. The silence felt heavier than the cold. Then the back door opened slowly. A thin line of warm light spilled into the yard. Thaddeus stepped outside, his face pale. Eloan, he said quietly, you weren't supposed to see that. I stood up, trembling with anger and confusion. Who is she? Yes. He looked away. And that was the moment I realized my life was about to split into before and after. Because what he said next would change everything I thought I knew about love, about marriage, and about the man I trusted with my lonely heart. And before he could answer, I heard the woman inside cry out again, this time saying a single word. Name. The cold wind pushed against my back as I stared at Thaddeus. My hands were shaking, but I could not tell if it was from the weather or from the fear crawling through my chest. She said my name, I whispered. Who is she? Thaddeus rubbed his forehead like a man carrying a weight too heavy for his shoulders. His breath came out in slow clouds. Eloan, please come inside. I will explain. I should have walked away. I should have demanded answers right there in the freezing yard. But curiosity is powerful, and fear is even stronger. I stepped past him and entered the house. Warm air wrapped around me, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside my heart. The woman lay on the couch under a blanket. Her face looked fragile, almost translucent. Her gray hair was thin, and her eyes fluttered as if she was fighting to stay awake. She looked close to my age, maybe a little younger. Her gaze found me immediately. Eloan, she whispered again, her voice cracked and weak. I stopped a few feet away. How do you know me? She tried to sit up but winced in pain. Thaddeus rushed to adjust the pillow behind her head. You need to rest, he said gently. My anger flared. Don't talk to her like I'm not standing here, I snapped. I deserve to know what is going on. Thaddeus turned toward me, sadness filling his eyes. Her name is Maris Bellamy, he said quietly. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it made my stomach twist. Who is she to you? He hesitated just long enough for me to feel the answer before he said it. She was my wife. The room spun. Was. Asked sharply. You said your wife passed away years ago. He nodded slowly. That's what I believed. The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at him, waiting for the joke, the explanation, the anything that would make sense. But there was only silence. Maris reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold but trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want this to happen like this." I pulled my hand away. My heart felt cracked open. "You are telling me you had another wife and somehow forgot about her?" Thaddeus sank into a chair, looking older than I had ever seen him. "Not forgot. Lust," he explained slowly, like each word hurt. Decades ago, before he moved to Montana, he and Maris had lived in Oregon. Their marriage had fallen apart during hard years filled with illness and financial trouble. She had left suddenly after a fight, disappearing without a trace. He searched for years but eventually believed she wanted to vanish. Later he was told she had died. I clenched my fists. "And you never thought to verify that?" He shook his head. "Back then things were different. No internet records, no easy searches. I moved on. I tried to rebuild my life." Maris spoke again, her voice shaking. "I was sick. My sister took me away." I didn't know what he believed. By the time I recovered, I was ashamed. Too much time had passed. I felt dizzy listening to them. "So why now? Why show up tonight?" Thaddeus looked down. "She contacted me 2 weeks ago. She found me through an old neighbor." My chest tightened. 2 weeks? And you said nothing?" He nodded, guilt written all over his face. I didn't know what to do. Legally, emotionally. I was scared. Maris coughed, the sound rough. "I didn't come to take him from you," she said softly. "I just needed help. Have no one left." I stared at her. Her skin was pale, almost gray. The moans I heard outside now made sense. She wasn't mysterious. She was hurting. But the betrayal still burned. "You locked me outside," I said, turning to Thaddeus. Like I was some child who couldn't handle the truth. He looked shattered. "I didn't want you to see her like this. I wanted to explain first." I laughed bitterly. Well, that plan failed. The clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. I walked to the kitchen and gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself. Memories flashed through my mind. The way Thaddeus smiled when we planted flowers. The promises we made about growing old together without secrets. And now this felt foolish. Replaceable. Behind me, I heard Maris speaking softly. "Eloan, please don't hate him. He's a good man." I turned around. "You don't get to tell me how to feel." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're right." She closed her eyes, exhausted. For a moment I thought she had fallen asleep. But then she whispered something that made my heart stop. "I know about your first husband." I frowned. "How?" She looked at Thaddeus. "He told me about you. Every day since he met you." I stared at my husband. He looked embarrassed but honest. "I told her because I was trying to explain why I couldn't just abandon you," he said. "You gave me a second life, Eloan." My anger softened for a second, but confusion rushed back. "Then why hide her?" "Because I didn't know what was right," he said. "She is still legally my wife. But you are my life now." The words hit me harder than I expected. I walked back to the couch and sat in the chair opposite them. "So what happens now?" No one answered. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. I looked at Maris closely. She looked like someone nearing the end of a long road. Frail. Lonely. Tired. I recognized that look. I had seen it in nursing homes during library volunteer visits. People waiting for someone to care. Part of me wanted to hate her, but another part felt pity. "Why did you say my name?" I asked softly. She smiled weakly. "He talks about you when he thinks I'm asleep. He says you saved him from loneliness." My throat tightened. I looked at Thaddeus. He looked like a man standing between two pasts, unable to choose. The betrayal still hurt, but something else crept in. Fear. Fear that life was messier than I wanted to believe. What if this was my future too? Alone and begging for help. The night stretched on. We sat together in awkward silence until Maris started coughing harder. Thaddeus rushed to her side. "She needs her medicine," he said. I watched him care for her with gentle hands. The same hands that made me tea when I was sick. The same patience. Hurt to see. Finally I stood up. Need air. I walked to the porch again, hugging myself against the cold. The sky was dark and endless. I thought about leaving, packing a bag and driving away before sunrise. But where would I go? After a few minutes, the door creaked open behind me. It was Maris, leaning against the frame, shivering. You shouldn't be out here, I said automatically. She smiled faintly. Neither should you. We stood there in silence. Then she said something unexpected. If you leave him because of me, he will never forgive himself. I turned to her. Are you asking me to stay? She shook her head slowly. I'm asking you to understand. Life doesn't end cleanly. Sometimes the past comes back before we are ready. Her words settled heavily between us. Inside I heard Thaddeus calling her name, worried. She started to turn back but paused. He loves you, Eloan. Can see it. Then she added quietly. And I think he is about to lose more than one wife. Before I could ask what she meant, she collapsed into a coughing fit, and Thaddeus rushed to catch her. As he lifted her, I noticed something fall from her pocket onto the porch. A folded piece of paper. Neither of them saw it. When they disappeared inside, I bent down and picked it up. It was a medical report. My eyes scanned the page quickly. And when I read the diagnosis at the top, my heart stopped. Because it explained the moaning. It explained the urgency. And it revealed a secret that neither of them had told me. Maris Bellamy was dying. And according to the date on the paper, she had only weeks left. I looked toward the warm light inside the house, my mind racing. Why didn't they tell me? And what else were they hiding? The paper shook in my hands as I read it again beneath the faint porch light. Terminal cardiac failure. Limited life expectancy. Comfort care recommended. I swallowed hard. My anger shifted into something heavier. Sadness, maybe. Or fear. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket before stepping back inside. Thaddeus was helping Maris sit upright on the couch. Her breathing sounded rough, like each breath had to fight its way out. You found her medicine? I asked quietly. He nodded without looking at me. The room felt different now that I knew the truth. The moans I had heard were not secrets or betrayal. They were pain. Still, I could not ignore the sting in my chest. Why didn't you tell me she was dying? Yes. Thaddeus froze. Maris closed her eyes. I wanted to tell you, he said softly. I just didn't know how. You didn't know how, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. So you locked me outside instead. His shoulders dropped. I was ashamed. The honesty in his voice softened something inside me, but not enough to erase the hurt. Maris reached for a glass of water, her hand shaking. I instinctively moved forward to help her hold it. She looked surprised but grateful. Thank you, she whispered. I nodded, unsure what to say. The clock showed almost 1 a.m. Outside, the world was quiet. Inside, my life felt like it had cracked open. I sat down across from them. Start from the beginning, I said. No more pieces. I want the whole truth. Thaddeus took a long breath. After Maris contacted him 2 weeks earlier, she told him about her illness. She had no family left except a distant cousin who couldn't care for her. She asked only for a place to rest for a few days while she figured out hospice care. I couldn't say no, he said. She was once my whole world. The words stung, but I stayed silent. He continued. I planned to tell you the next day. But every time I tried, you looked so happy. Kept putting it off. I laughed bitterly. That's not kindness, Thaddeus. That's cowardice. He nodded. No. Maris cleared her throat. Please don't fight because of me. I turned to her. You should have told me too. She looked down. I thought he had told you. Tonight was the first time I realized he hadn't. The silence that followed felt heavy, like snowfall pressing on a rooftop. I stood up and began pacing. My joints ached, but my mind raced faster than my body could keep up. At 76, I had learned that life rarely gives clean choices. Still, I wanted something simple. Someone to blame. But looking at Maris, frail and tired, I couldn't. Thaddeus finally spoke again. I don't expect you to forgive me tonight. I stopped pacing. Then what do you expect? He looked at me with eyes full of fear. I expect you to walk out that door. The honesty caught me off guard. Maybe I should, I said quietly. The words hung there. Even I didn't know if I meant them. Maris shifted, wincing. She's tired, I said automatically. Thaddeus nodded. She should sleep. We helped her lie down. I tucked the blanket around her without thinking. Her skin felt cool, fragile. As she drifted off, she whispered something barely audible. He's afraid to be alone again. Froze. When we stepped into the kitchen, I closed the door softly behind us. You're scared, I said. Thaddeus rubbed his hands together. After my first marriage ended, I spent years alone. Then you came along. I thought God was giving me a second chance. Now the past came back, and I didn't know how to hold both truths without losing you. I leaned against the counter. You should have trusted me enough to let me choose how to feel. He nodded slowly. You're right. For a while we just stood there listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Then he said something that surprised me. If you want me to ask her to leave tomorrow, I will. I stared at him. She's dying, Thaddeus. He closed his eyes. No. I sighed, exhausted. I don't know what I want. That was the truth. The night felt endless. I made tea because it gave my hand something to do. The warm mug steadied me. I glanced through the kitchen doorway at Maris sleeping on the couch. How long does she have? I asked quietly. He hesitated. The doctor said maybe a month. Maybe less. Month. Such a small amount of time compared to the years of loneliness we all carried. I thought about my own age. About how quickly days turned into years. Finally, I said something I didn't expect. She can stay. Thaddeus looked shocked. Are you sure? No, I said honestly. But leaving her alone would haunt me more than this situation already does. His eyes filled with tears. Loan. Don't thank me yet, I said. We still have to figure out what this means for us. He nodded slowly. That night, I slept in the guest room. The house felt unfamiliar, like someone else's life. I stared at the ceiling for hours. Memories of my first husband came back. We had faced illness together, fear together. Love had never been perfect, but it had been honest. I wondered if I could ever trust Thaddeus again. Morning came gray and cold. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet voices. When I walked into the living room, Maris was awake, wrapped in a blanket, looking out the window. She smiled weakly. Good morning, Eloan. He nodded. How are you feeling? Like an old house before a storm, she said with a small laugh. Thaddeus set a cup of coffee in front of me. I made it the way you like. I thanked him but avoided his eyes. The three of us sat together awkwardly. Felt almost absurd. A husband and two wives sharing breakfast like strangers tied together by history. Then Maris spoke. I have a favor to ask you. I looked at her. What is it? She hesitated. When my time comes, I don't want to die in a hospital. I want to be somewhere peaceful. Somewhere with people who don't hate me. Her honesty pierced me. I don't hate you, I said softly. I just don't understand any of this yet. She smiled sadly. That makes two of us. Over the next few hours, something strange happened. The anger that had burned so hot began to cool. Not disappear but change shape. I saw how Thaddeus moved carefully around Maris. How he adjusted her blanket without thinking. I recognized the same care he gave me when my knees hurt. Love, I realized, wasn't always neat. Sometimes it was messy and overlapping and full of mistakes. Still the pain remained. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside to clear my head. The wind was calmer now, the sky pale blue. I thought about calling my daughter, but I couldn't imagine explaining this. As I stood there, I heard voices inside. I didn't mean to listen, but the window was slightly open. Maris's voice drifted out. You have to tell her the rest, Thaddeus. My heart stopped. The rest. His answer was too quiet to hear. Then Maris spoke again. She deserves the truth before it's too late. I moved closer, breath held. What truth? But just then the floor creaked inside, and their voices stopped. I stepped back quickly, my pulse racing. There was more. Something bigger they hadn't told me yet. When I went back inside, both of them looked up. Their faces were tense. "Everything okay?" asked casually. Thaddeus forced a smile. Just talking." But I saw the fear in his eyes. That night, as I sat alone in the guest room, the medical paper still hidden in my drawer, I realized something. My story wasn't about being replaced. It was about discovering how much of my life had been built on half-truths. And somewhere in this house, another secret was waiting to be revealed. I turned off the light, but sleep wouldn't come. Because I kept hearing Maris's words echo in my mind. Tell her the rest. And I knew whatever that truth was, it would change everything all over again. I barely slept that night. The guest room felt too quiet, like the walls were listening. Every creak of the floor made me think someone was standing outside my door ready to explain everything, and at the same time afraid to do it. When morning came, pale light slipped through the curtains. My body felt heavy, but my mind was racing. I heard voices again, low and careful. I walked down the hallway slowly. The smell of oatmeal drifted from the kitchen. Thaddeus stood at the stove, stirring gently. Maris sat at the table wrapped in a cardigan that used to belong to me. For a second the sight felt almost normal. Then I remembered what I heard yesterday. Tell her the rest. I sat down without speaking. My coffee cup waited beside my plate. Thaddeus had already made it the way I liked. Small kindnesses can hurt more than cruelty when trust is broken. "Morning," he said softly. He nodded. Maris watched me with tired eyes. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "Neither did you," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Fair enough." We ate quietly. The clink of spoons filled the silence. Finally I set my cup down. "I heard you two talking yesterday." Thaddeus froze. "About telling me the rest." His shoulders stiffened. "Eloan, maybe this is not the right time." I leaned forward. "The right time was before you locked me outside at midnight." Maris closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "He needs to tell you," she said gently. Thaddeus sat down slowly, rubbing his hands together. "There is something you need to understand about how we met." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" He glanced at Maris, then back to me. "When you and I met at the farmer's market 3 years ago, it was not entirely by chance." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" He swallowed hard. "Maris knew about you before I did." The words landed like ice water. I turned toward her. "How?" She looked ashamed. "I volunteered at the same hospital where you used to read to patients. I saw you there months before you met him." I searched my memory. Faces from the hospital blurred together, but I vaguely remembered a quiet woman in the hallway, sometimes watching from afar. "You watched me?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "You were kind. You made people laugh. After everything that happened in my life, I kept thinking someone like you could help him be happy again." I stared at her, confused. "Help him?" Thaddeus spoke quietly. "Maris and I had reconnected briefly years ago. We were still legally married but living apart. She knew I was lonely." My chest tightened. "So what are you saying? That she introduced us?" He nodded once. "I met you because Maris told me where you went every Saturday." The room spun. "You planned it." "Not planned like that," he said quickly. "I just went hoping to meet you. The rest happened naturally." I pushed my chair back slightly. "You both decided my life without my permission." Maris reached for my hand but stopped halfway. "I never meant to manipulate you. I thought I was helping him find joy again. I never expected things to go this far." My voice rose despite myself. "This far?" "I married him." Tears filled her eyes. "No." I stood up and paced the kitchen. Anger mixed with disbelief. All those moments I thought were fate. The accidental meetings. The shared jokes. The feeling of destiny. Were they real at all? I turned to Thaddeus. "Did you love me from the start? Or was I just someone your wife picked out for you?" His eyes filled with pain. "Eloan, I fell in love with you honestly. Nothing about that was fake. But the beginning was." He didn't answer. The silence told me everything. I walked out onto the porch, breathing hard. The sky was clear, but my thoughts were a storm. I felt foolish again, like an old woman tricked into a second life she never fully understood. After a few minutes I heard the door open behind me. It was Maris. "You should be resting," I said without turning. She stepped beside me slowly. "I know you hate me right now." I crossed my arms. "I don't even know what I feel." She nodded. "When I saw you at the hospital, you reminded me of who I used to be before life got heavy. I thought if he met you he would laugh again. I thought I was doing something good." I finally looked at her. "And what about you? Were you planning to come back one day?" She shook her head. "Well, I thought my story with him was over forever." Her voice trembled. "Life is cruel sometimes. It circles back when you least expect it." I sighed. "You should have told me sooner." She nodded. We stood in silence. I noticed how thin her arms looked, how tired her breathing sounded. The anger inside me softened again despite myself. "You really are dying, aren't you?" I asked quietly. She gave a small smile. "We all are. I just happen to know my schedule." I almost laughed at the honesty. Inside the house, Thaddeus watched us through the window, worried. "He looks scared," she said. "He should be," I muttered. She chuckled softly, then coughed. I guided her back inside without thinking. The day passed slowly. Tension hung in the air, but something had shifted. At least now the secrets were coming out. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Maris asked if we could sit in the living room together. "I have one more thing to say," she whispered. I sat across from her. Thaddeus stood behind her chair. She looked at both of us. "When I left him years ago, I was pregnant." My breath caught. Thaddeus blinked in shock. "What?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I lost the baby during the illness. I never told you because I didn't want you to chase me." The room fell silent. Thaddeus sat down slowly, staring at her like he didn't recognize her. "You never told me," he whispered. She nodded. "No. It was my mistake." The confession hit me hard too. The grief in the room felt ancient, deeper than any of us. I realized then that their story had been shaped by loss long before I arrived. And now I was standing in the middle of unfinished history. Later that night, I sat alone with my thoughts. Part of me wanted to run from all of it. But another part felt something unexpected. Compassion. These were not villains. Just broken people who made poor choices trying to survive loneliness. Around midnight, I heard a soft cry from the living room. I rushed out. Maris was clutching her chest, breathing hard. Thaddeus panicked. "I think it's happening," he said. I knelt beside her. "Should we call an ambulance?" She shook her head weakly. "No hospital." Her eyes found mine. "Please." I held her hand, feeling how fragile it was. Thaddeus looked terrified. "What do we do?" I realized then that despite everything, we were a strange kind of family now. Bound by secrets and mistakes, and the simple fact that none of us wanted to face the end alone. I took a deep breath. "We stay with her," I said. As we sat there in the dim light, her breathing slowly eased. But before she drifted into sleep again, she whispered something that made my heart skip. "There's a letter," she said softly, "hidden in my bag. For you, Eloan." I frowned. "For me." She nodded faintly. "When I'm gone, read it." My chest tightened. What could she possibly need to tell me that wasn't already said? I looked at the worn leather bag near the couch. And for the first time since this began, I felt something new. Fear of what the next truth might take away. I could not stop looking at the bag. It sat near the couch like something alive, quiet but heavy with meaning. Maris had fallen asleep again after the pain passed. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Thaddeus stayed beside her, watching every rise and fall of her chest. I stood by the window, arms wrapped around myself. A letter for me. Why would she write to me instead of speaking plainly? The clock moved slowly toward dawn. None of us said much. The house felt suspended in time, like the world outside had paused to let us face something we were not ready for. When morning light finally crept in, Maris woke weaker than before. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "You stayed," she whispered. I nodded. "So did you." She laughed softly but winced. Thaddeus made breakfast again, but nobody ate much. The silence between us had changed. It no longer felt sharp with anger. Instead, it felt fragile, like glass that could break if we moved too quickly. After a while, Maris looked at me. "You should read it now," she said. I hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I don't want you to wait until it's too late." My stomach twisted. I walked slowly to the bag and opened it. Inside were medications, tissues, an old photograph, and a sealed envelope with my name written in careful handwriting. Loan. I carried it back to the chair and sat down. My hands trembled as I opened it. The paper inside smelled faintly of lavender. I began to read. "Dear Eloan, if you are reading this, it means I finally had the courage to tell you the truth. I know you probably think I ruined your life. Maybe I did. But there are things you do not understand yet." I paused, breathing slowly, then continued. "When I saw you at the hospital, I did not just see kindness. I saw strength. I knew Thaddeus needed someone strong because he never recovered from losing our child. He blamed himself for years. I thought if he met you, he might finally learn to live again." My eyes flicked up toward Thaddeus. He looked away, jaw tight. Kept reading. "But there is another reason I chose you. You reminded me of someone I once knew. Someone I lost. I hoped you might forgive him in ways I never could." My heart pounded faster. The next line made my breath catch. "I knew your first husband, Eloan." I stopped reading. "What?" I whispered. Thaddeus looked confused. "What does it say?" I shook my head and continued. "Years ago, before my illness, I worked at a small legal office in Oregon. A man named Charles Briarwood came through during a property dispute. He talked about his wife often. About you. I remembered your name because he loved you loudly, proudly. When I met you years later, I realized who you were." My hands shook harder. "Charles was my first husband. How could Maris have known him?" The letter continued. "He never knew who I was beyond that office. But he told me something once that stayed with me. He said if anything happened to him, he hoped you would find another love that made you laugh again." Tears blurred my vision. I remembered Charles saying those words years ago in our kitchen. I had thought it was just another sweet promise. I swallowed and read on. "When I met Thaddeus again and saw how lonely he was, I thought maybe fate was giving me a chance to help two broken people heal each other. I know now that I interfered too much. I'm sorry." I lowered the letter slightly. The room was quiet except for Maris's breathing. The final lines were shaky, as if written by a tired hand. "I'm leaving soon. But I want you to know this was never about taking him from you. It was about giving him back to life. And perhaps giving you a new one too. Please do not spend your remaining years angry. Life is shorter than we think. With hope. Maris." I stared at the paper long after I finished. My chest ached, not from anger now but from something softer and heavier. I folded the letter carefully. "She knew Charles," I said quietly. Thaddeus frowned. "Your first husband." He nodded. I told them what the letter said. Maris watched me with tired eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said softly. I wiped my face. "You should have trusted me with the truth from the beginning." "I know," she whispered. Thaddeus sat down slowly. "All these years," he said quietly, "I thought I was starting over. I didn't realize everything was connected long before we met. The idea made my head spin. Lives crossing without us knowing. Choices made by strangers that shaped our futures." I looked at Maris. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" She smiled sadly. "Because you deserved a clean love story. And I ruined that already." I shook my head. "Life doesn't give clean stories." She nodded. "Exactly." The rest of the day passed quietly. Something inside me had shifted. The anger that once burned now felt distant, like a storm that had moved away. I watched Thaddeus read to Maris from an old book. I noticed how carefully he turned the pages so she could follow, and I realized something uncomfortable. He truly loved her once, but he also loved me now. Love did not divide neatly into before and after. It overlapped, complicated and human. That evening Maris grew weaker. Her breathing became shallower. She slept more. I sat beside her for a while, holding her hand. She opened her eyes suddenly. "Are you still angry?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "I'm hurt," I said honestly. "But I don't think I'm angry anymore." She smiled faintly. "That's enough." Later, when Thaddeus stepped into the kitchen, she leaned closer. "Promise me something," she whispered. "What?" "Take care of him when I'm gone." I frowned. "That isn't your decision to make." She laughed softly. "Well, but I think you will anyway." I squeezed her hand. "Get some rest." Night settled over the house again. The same time of night when this strange journey began. I sat by the window remembering how I had stood outside in the cold, hearing her moan and imagining betrayal. Now I knew it had been pain calling for help. Around midnight, Thaddeus sat beside me. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For all of it." He nodded. "No." He looked exhausted. "Do you think we can move forward after this?" I considered the question. "I don't know yet. But I'm still here." He reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. From the couch, Maris made a soft sound. We both turned quickly. Her eyes were open, staring toward us. "You two look peaceful," she whispered. We stood and went to her side. She smiled faintly. But then she closed her eyes again. Minutes passed. Her breathing slowed. I felt a strange stillness settle over the room. Thaddeus gripped her hand tightly. "Maris," he whispered. No answer. The silence deepened. I placed my fingers gently against her wrist, and my heart sank. She was still. Thaddeus let out a broken sound I had never heard from him before. Not loud, just deep and raw. I put my arm around his shoulders. For a long time we sat there with her, saying nothing. The house felt different now. Quieter. Emptier. I realized that despite everything, I would miss her. Eventually I stood and went to the window. Outside, the night was calm. I thought about the letter in my pocket and the strange way life connects people across time. Then something caught my eye. Car slowly pulled into our driveway. Headlights washed across the porch. I frowned. It was almost 1 a.m. The engine turned off. A man stepped out. Young, maybe in his 40s, wearing a dark coat. He walked toward the house with determined steps. When he reached the porch light, I gasped. Because I recognized the shape of his face. He looked exactly like Charles. And before I could speak, the doorbell rang. The doorbell rang again, sharp and loud in the silence of the house. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Behind me, Thaddeus was still kneeling beside Maris, lost in grief, unaware of what was happening at the front door. I wiped my face quickly and walked toward the entrance. My legs felt unsteady, as if the floor had suddenly become unfamiliar. When I opened the door, the cold night air rushed in. The man standing there looked at me with wide, uncertain eyes. He was tall, with tired lines around his mouth. His dark hair was streaked with gray, and his face carried the same gentle shape I had seen every day in old photographs of my first husband. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. "Can I help you?" I asked softly. He swallowed. "Are you Eloan Briarwood?" My voice caught. His eyes filled with something like relief. "I'm Jonah Bellamy," he said. The last name hit me first. Bellamy. Maris's last name. My mind raced. Before I could speak, he glanced past me into the house, noticing the dim lights, the quiet sadness hanging in the air. "I'm sorry to come this late," he said quickly. "I got a call from hospice. They said my mother might be here." "Mother?" The world tilted again. "You're Maris's son," I whispered. He nodded slowly. I felt the air leave my lungs. She never mentioned a son. I stepped aside automatically. "Come in." He hesitated at the threshold, then walked inside quietly. The moment he saw the living room, he stopped. Thaddeus looked up, confused. Who is this? Jonah stepped forward, his voice trembling. Mom. The silence answered him. He moved slowly toward the couch, as if afraid the scene might disappear if he moved too fast. When he realized she was gone, his shoulders collapsed. No, he whispered. I was too late. I looked at Thaddeus, who stared in stunned disbelief. You had a son? He asked softly, almost to himself. Jonah turned, confusion mixing with grief. You're Thaddeus. Thaddeus nodded slowly. Jonah laughed bitterly through tears. She told me about you my whole life. The man she left behind. The words hung in the air. My mind struggled to catch up. You said you lost the baby, I whispered. Jonah looked at me. She told you that. I nodded weakly. He shook his head. Well, she didn't lose me. She left because she was scared. She thought he didn't want a child. Thaddeus's face drained of color. What? Jonah continued, voice shaking. She raised me alone. She said it was better that way. I only found out your name last year when she got sick. The room spun again. How many truths were buried in this house? Thaddeus sat down heavily. I never knew, he whispered. Jonah wiped his eyes. She didn't want you to know. She said she made the choice and had to live with it. I looked at Maris's peaceful face and felt a strange ache. Even at the end, she had carried secrets. Jonah knelt beside her, holding her hand gently. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner, Mom. His voice cracked. I stepped back, giving him space, but my thoughts were racing. If Jonah was Maris's son, then the story she told us about losing the baby had been a lie. Why hide that from Thaddeus? Hours seemed to pass in silence, though the clock barely moved. Eventually Jonah stood, wiping his face. Thank you for being with her, he said quietly, looking at me and Thaddeus. She was afraid to die alone. Thaddeus nodded, unable to speak. Jonah glanced at me. You're Eloan. He studied me carefully. She talked about you often. Said you were stronger than she ever was. The words made my chest tighten. I don't feel strong, I admitted. He gave a sad smile. Neither did she. The three of us sat together in the early hours of morning, strangers connected by one woman's choices. Finally, Jonah looked at Thaddeus. She loved you, you know, even when she left. Thaddeus stared at his hands. Then why did she go? Jonah hesitated. She told me once that you wanted a stable life. Ranch. Quiet future. She felt like she was drowning back then. Depression, fear, everything. She thought she would ruin you. Thaddeus's eyes filled with tears. So she decided for both of us. Jonah nodded. Seems like that was her pattern. I thought about the letter she wrote me. About her belief that she was helping everyone by controlling the story. Maybe she truly believed that. Maybe she was just afraid. Morning light slowly filled the room. None of us had slept. At one point, Jonah pulled out his phone and began making arrangements. Hospice. Funeral home. Quiet conversations that felt unreal. I walked into the kitchen to make coffee for everyone. The familiar routine grounded me. Thaddeus joined me after a while. I had a son, he said quietly, as if testing the words. You didn't know, I said gently. He shook his head. I lost 30 years I didn't even know existed. I placed a hand on his arm. You didn't choose that. He looked at me, eyes red. Have I done anything right, Eloan? The question broke my heart. Decide. We all make mistakes, some bigger than others. He nodded slowly. Do you regret marrying me? The question surprised me. Thought carefully. No, I said finally. But I wish we had started with honesty. He swallowed hard. We returned to the living room. Jonah was sitting quietly beside his mother, staring at old photos on the shelf. One of them showed me and Thaddeus at our wedding. He picked it up. She kept this in her bag, he said softly. Said she wanted to meet the woman who made him smile again. My throat tightened. Even with all her secrets, Maris had tried to do something good in her own complicated way. By afternoon, the funeral home arrived. Watching them take her away felt surreal. The house suddenly felt larger and emptier. Jonah lingered near the door. I don't know if this is strange, he said hesitantly, but I like to get to know you both. That's okay. Thaddeus looked overwhelmed. I'd like that, he said quietly. Jonah nodded, then turned to me. And you too. She wanted us to meet properly someday. I smiled faintly. I think she got her wish. When he left, silence settled over the house again. I walked to the porch, remembering the first night, the cold, the fear, the moaning that started everything. Thaddeus joined me. What happens now? He asked softly. I looked at the empty driveway. I don't know yet. He nodded. I deserve that answer. We stood together quietly. For the first time, I felt the weight of the future pressing in. The secrets were out, but the damage remained. Trust doesn't return overnight. As evening fell, I went inside to tidy up. While adjusting the couch cushions, something slipped out from between them. An envelope. My name again. Loan. My pulse quickened. I turned it over. The handwriting was Maris's. Another letter. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sentence. There is one final truth you deserve to know. Check the old cedar box under the bed. I stared at the words, confused and uneasy. How many truths could one woman leave behind? I looked toward the bedroom down the hallway. The house felt suddenly quieter than ever. And with a deep breath, I walked toward the room, unaware that what waited in that cedar box would change not only my marriage but my entire understanding of my own past. The hallway felt longer than usual as I walked toward the bedroom. Every step seemed louder in the quiet house. The evening light faded through the windows, stretching shadows across the floor. Behind me I heard Thaddeus moving slowly in the kitchen, washing cups that did not need washing, keeping his hands busy so his heart would not break apart. I clutched the envelope as if it might vanish. There is one final truth you deserve to know. Check the old cedar box under the bed. I stepped into the bedroom we had shared for 3 years. The scent of wood polish and lavender lingered in the air. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. I knelt slowly, my knees aching, and reached under the bed. My fingers brushed something smooth and cool. Box. I pulled it out carefully. It was small, made of cedar, worn with age. The lid was tied with a faded ribbon. My heart beat faster. Why would Maris know about something hidden in my bedroom? I sat on the edge of the bed and untied the ribbon. Inside were old papers, photographs, and a small velvet pouch. I frowned. These were not mine. At the top was a black and white photograph. Picked it up. A young woman stood beside a man in front of a small ranch house. The woman was Maris. The man was Thaddeus, decades younger. But what made my breath catch was the background. I knew that house. It was my childhood home in Oregon. My hands shook. That couldn't be right. I turned the photo over. Summer 1968. Briarwood property. Briarwood. My last name. I sat very still as pieces began to shift in my mind. Beneath the photo were letters tied together. The paper was yellow with age. Open the first one. Dear Maris, thank you for helping my daughter Eloan with her books. She talks about you all the time. You remind her of the big sister she never had. Signed, Clara Briarwood. My mother's handwriting. I gasped softly. Maris knew my family. Not just through Charles. Long before him. My chest tightened as I read more letters. They spoke of summer visits, helping with chores, laughter in the kitchen. My mother thanking Maris for watching over me while she worked. Memories stirred faintly. A kind older girl reading stories to me under a tree. A gentle voice telling me to dream big. I had forgotten. Maris was that girl. I covered my mouth, tears forming. All this time, she had known me since childhood. The bedroom door creaked open. Thaddeus stood there quietly. Eloan, you okay? I looked up slowly. She knew me when I was little. He frowned. What do you mean? I handed him the photograph. His eyes widened. I remember that day, he whispered. We visited a family friend's ranch. I didn't realize that was your home. I laughed softly, disbelief mixing with sadness. Neither did I. I opened another letter. This one was from Maris. She wrote about leaving town, about feeling lost, about wanting to escape before adulthood trapped her. Then another letter. And another. The story unfolded slowly. Maris had been close to my mother. She had babysat me when I was a child. Then she left abruptly and lost contact. Years later she met Thaddeus, married him, and her life moved in a different direction. I looked up at him. She was part of my life long before you or Charles. He sat beside me, stunned. She never told me. He nodded. She kept secrets from everyone. At the bottom of the box was the velvet pouch. Inside was a ring. A simple silver band engraved with tiny flowers. I recognized it instantly. It had belonged to my mother. She lost it years before she died. Tears filled my eyes. Why did Maris have this? I unfolded the final note tucked beneath the ring. Loan. I borrowed this ring the day your mother died. I meant to return it, but life pulled me away. I kept it because it reminded me of home and of the little girl who believed stories could fix everything. I never expected to meet you again. When I realized who you were at the hospital, I thought maybe this was my chance to return what I took and make one good thing right. I am sorry for all the ways I interfered. I thought I was stitching broken pieces together, but maybe I only made the knots tighter. Please forgive me if you can. Maris. I lowered the note slowly. The room felt thick with memory. Thaddeus placed a hand over mine. Are you okay? I nodded weakly. Think so. But inside, emotions tangled together. Anger, sadness, nostalgia, strange gratitude. Maris had not been just an intruder in my marriage. She was a ghost from my childhood, someone who had shaped me before I even knew it. I laughed softly through tears. No wonder she looked familiar. Thaddeus sighed. She carried this all alone. I looked at him. She thought she was fixing things. He nodded. She always tried to carry everyone's burdens. We sat quietly for a long time. Later that night, I walked through the house holding the ring. The memories it carried felt warm in my palm. I thought about how easy it is to think our lives start when we notice them. But the truth is, so many threads are woven long before we understand the pattern. Jonah called just after dinner. The funeral would be in 2 days. He asked if we would come. Course, I said. After the call, I stood by the window watching darkness settle outside. Thaddeus joined me. Do you regret staying? He asked softly. I thought about the night he locked me outside. About the secrets, the pain, the shock. Then I thought about the letters. The ring. The strange circle that had brought us all together. No, I said quietly. I think I'm starting to understand. He let out a slow breath. I'm afraid you'll leave anyway. I turned toward him. I'm not promising everything is fixed. Trust takes time. He nodded. No. But I wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. And strangely hopeful. That night I dreamed of my childhood home. A younger Maris laughing in the sunlight. My mother smiling. A little girl running through tall grass. When I woke, tears were on my cheeks. The day of the funeral came quickly. It was held in a small chapel surrounded by pine trees. Jonah greeted us at the entrance, eyes red but calm. Thank you for coming, he said. Inside, photos of Maris lined a table. Young and laughing. Middle-aged and strong. Older and tired but smiling softly. I studied them and realized how many versions of a person can exist. During the service, Jonah spoke about his mother's kindness, her mistakes, and her endless attempts to make things right. She believed people deserved second chances, he said. Even when she didn't believe she deserved one herself. His words hit me deeply. Afterward, as people drifted away, Jonah approached me. She left something for you, he said, handing me a small envelope. Another one? Asked gently. He nodded. She wrote a lot near the end. I smiled sadly. That sounds like her. I tucked it into my purse, not ready to read it yet. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. Felt lighter somehow. As we drove home, Thaddeus kept glancing at me. What are you thinking? He asked. I looked out the window. I'm thinking life is messy. But maybe that's what makes it beautiful. He smiled faintly. When we arrived home, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the final envelope. Inside was one sentence. The greatest love is the one that survives truth. I stared at the words for a long time. And for the first time since that cold midnight, I felt something settle inside me. But just as I folded the note, the phone rang again. Answered. A woman's voice spoke carefully. Is this Eloan Briarwood? I'm calling from the county records office. There's something regarding your family property that you need to know. My heart skipped. What property? The Briarwood Ranch in Oregon, she said. I frowned. That land was sold decades ago. There was a pause. According to our records, it was never sold. And you are listed as the sole owner. Froze. Because if that was true, then someone had hidden an entire inheritance from me. And suddenly I realized Maris's final truth might not have been the last after all. I held the phone tightly, afraid I had misheard. I'm sorry, I said slowly. Could you repeat that? The woman on the line sounded patient, professional. According to county records, the Briarwood Ranch is still in your name, Eloan Briarwood. There has been recent activity on the title, which is why we're contacting you. Recent activity. My heart raced. That land was sold after my parents died, I said. I remember signing papers. There was a pause as she checked something. The transfer was never completed. The paperwork was filed incorrectly decades ago. Legally, ownership never changed. I sat down heavily. That's impossible. I understand it's surprising, she said gently. But we need you to come in and verify details. There may also be unpaid taxes and other matters. Unpaid taxes. The words blurred together. I thanked her and hung up slowly. Thaddeus watched me from across the kitchen. What happened? I stared at him. My family ranch. It still belongs to me. He blinked. What? Apparently it was never sold. He sat down, equally stunned. That land was huge, Eloan. He nodded. Hundreds of acres. Fields, barns, a small house. My childhood. For years I believed it was gone. After my parents passed, lawyers handled everything. I signed documents without understanding much. I was grieving, young, trusting. And now, suddenly it was back. I leaned back in my chair, dizzy. Why now? Thaddeus frowned. You said the county contacted you because of recent activity. Someone must have tried to change something. Chill ran through me. Ooh. My eyes drifted toward the hallway where Maris once rested. Could this somehow connect to her? She had known my family. She had kept letters. She had returned the ring. Maybe she knew something I didn't. The next morning we drove to the county office in Oregon. The journey felt strange, like traveling back into a life I thought had ended long ago. As we crossed state lines, memories returned in flashes. Summer mornings chasing chickens. My mother's voice calling me in for dinner. The smell of hay and rain. I hadn't visited in over 40 years. The county building was small and plain. A woman named Diane greeted us with a folder thick with paperwork. She smiled kindly. This is unusual, she said. The ranch was assumed sold in the 70s, but legally it stayed under your name because the buyer never completed final payment. She frowned. Why didn't anyone tell me? She shook her head. Records were paper back then. Things slipped through cracks. She slid a document toward me. Recently someone filed an inquiry to transfer ownership. My stomach tightened. Ooh. She pointed to a name. Maris Bellamy. I stared. She had tried to transfer the ranch to me. My throat closed. Why would she do that? Diane continued. She submitted corrected documents but passed away before completing the process. That triggered our system to notify the legal owner. I sat in stunned silence. Even near the end, Maris had been trying to fix another piece of the past. Thaddeus squeezed my hand gently. Looks like she was making things right again. I nodded slowly, tears prickling my eyes. Diane explained the situation carefully. The land still existed but had fallen into disrepair. Taxes were owed, though not impossible to manage. Then she added something unexpected. There's also a small house still standing. Someone has been maintaining it. I frowned. Ooh. He checked the file. A local caretaker. Jonah Bellamy. I looked at Thaddeus in shock. Jonah. My mind raced. After leaving the office, I called him immediately. You've been taking care of the ranch? I asked when he answered. He sounded nervous. Mom asked me to. Years ago. She said it belonged to someone important and that one day the truth would come out. I laughed softly in disbelief. She planned this. He sighed. She didn't tell me everything. Just that she wanted to give something back. We drove to the ranch that afternoon. The road felt familiar, winding through fields and pine trees. When the old gate came into view, my breath caught. The sign still read Briarwood Ranch. The paint was faded, but the letters were clear. I stepped out slowly, emotion flooding me. The house looked smaller than I remembered, but it stood proud against the wide open sky. The barn leaned slightly, but someone had repaired parts of it. Jonah stood near the porch, hands in his pockets. I didn't know if you'd come, he said softly. I walked toward him. You kept this place alive. He shrugged. Mom said it mattered to you, even if you didn't know it yet. I looked around, tears slipping down my face. It mattered to her too. He nodded. She talked about this ranch a lot. Said it was where she felt safe once. I smiled sadly. It was safe. For both of us, I guess. We spent the afternoon walking the property. Every corner stirred memories. The old swing under the oak tree. The creek where I used to collect stones. Thaddeus watched quietly, giving me space. At one point he said softly, "You look younger here." I laughed. Feel younger. As the sun began to set, we gathered on the porch. Jonah hesitated. There's something else you should know. I looked at him. Mom didn't just maintain the ranch. She paid the taxes for years. Quietly. So it wouldn't be taken away. I stared at him, shocked. She never told me. He nodded. She said it was a debt she owed your family. Emotion overwhelmed me. Maris had carried this secret for decades, protecting my inheritance while I believed it was gone. Why? I whispered. Jonah shrugged softly. Maybe because she loved you in her own way. The wind moved through the fields, carrying the scent of earth and grass. I realized then that Maris had spent her life trying to repair what she broke, even when no one knew. That night we stayed at a small motel nearby. I couldn't sleep. The ranch was mine again. But what did that mean? In the darkness, Thaddeus spoke. What are you thinking? I stared at the ceiling. I don't know if I want to sell it or keep it. Feels like a gift and a burden at the same time. He nodded. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. I turned toward him. Would you live there with me? He hesitated only a moment. If that's what you want. The simplicity of his answer warmed me. The next morning I walked the ranch alone. The silence felt peaceful, not lonely. For the first time in months my heart felt clear. I realized something important. This story wasn't about betrayal or secrets anymore. It was about restoration. As I stood near the old fence, my phone rang again. Another unfamiliar number. Hello. A man's voice spoke carefully. Mrs. Briarwood. This is attorney Kyle Mercer. I represent a trust created by Maris Bellamy. I stopped walking. A trust. Yes, he said. She left instructions that it be released to you after her passing. My pulse quickened. What kind of trust? There was a pause. It includes financial assets. And a letter explaining everything. I think you should come in person. I looked out across the land stretching endlessly before me. Even in death, Maris had one more surprise. And I suddenly realized that the final twist she promised might be bigger than anything yet. The wind moved gently across the ranch as I lowered the phone. The grass shimmered under the morning sun. And for a moment the world felt too quiet for the words I had just heard. Trust. Maris had left me something else. I stood there staring at the fields, trying to understand how one woman could keep so many secrets and still somehow leave behind kindness. Thaddeus stepped outside the motel room, holding 2 cups of coffee. You look like you saw a ghost, he said softly. I turned toward him. Apparently Maris left a trust in my name. He froze. A trust. I nodded slowly. The attorney wants to meet. He handed me the coffee and sat beside me on the porch bench. She keeps surprising us even after she's gone, he murmured. I watched the steam rise from my cup. I don't know if I'm ready for another surprise. But by noon we were back on the road, heading toward a small town office where the attorney waited. The building looked ordinary, plain brick with a single sign near the door. Inside smelled like paper and old wood. A man in his 50s stood to greet us. Mrs. Briarwood, I'm Kyle Mercer. Thank you for coming. His voice was kind but careful, the way people speak when dealing with grief. We sat at a round table. He opened a folder thick with documents. Before we begin, he said, I want to say that Maris spoke very highly of you. My throat tightened. She didn't always show that. He gave a small sad smile. She carried guilt. This was her way of trying to make peace. He pushed a sealed envelope toward me. She asked that you read this first. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was familiar now. Loan. If you are reading this, then I am gone. I hope you're standing somewhere that makes you feel alive again. Maybe the ranch. I took a slow breath and kept reading. I know you think I lived my life hiding things. You are right. I was afraid of hurting people, so I kept choosing silence. Silence only made the wounds deeper. The trust one created is not meant to buy forgiveness. It is meant to return something that was never mine to keep. Paused, heart pounding. The money comes from land I sold years ago that originally belonged to your family. I helped negotiate the sale when you were young. I knew the paperwork was wrong. I stayed quiet because I was scared and selfish. Tears blurred the words. She had known all along. Continued. I spent years trying to make up for that mistake. Paying taxes on the ranch. Keeping it safe until it could return to you. Please do not carry bitterness into your remaining years. Use this gift to live fully. Laugh loudly. Love honestly. And if you can, forgive me. Maris. I lowered the letter slowly. The room felt heavy. The attorney cleared his throat. The trust contains enough funds to restore the ranch completely, he explained. There are also monthly payments arranged for your retirement. I stared at him. She spent years fixing this. He nodded. She planned carefully. She wanted you secure. Thaddeus squeezed my hand under the table. I felt overwhelmed. Gratitude mixed with sadness. Maris had spent so much of her life trying to repair a mistake I never even knew about. Why didn't she just tell me? I whispered. The attorney shrugged gently. Sometimes people think actions are easier than apologies. After signing paperwork, we stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight. I felt lighter but also strangely tired. Thaddeus turned to me. What are you thinking now? I laughed softly. That my life feels like a book someone keeps adding chapters to without asking me. He smiled faintly. Maybe this one ends better. We drove back to the ranch that evening. The sky glowed orange as the sun dipped low. I walked through the house slowly, touching walls I had not seen since childhood. Dust floated in the light. The floor creaked in familiar ways. For the first time, I imagined what it could become again. Jonah arrived shortly after with takeout food. He looked nervous. How did it go? I showed him the letter. He read quietly, then sighed. She always carried that guilt, he said. She talked about it late at night sometimes. I looked at him. Did you know about the trust? He nodded. Only a little. She said it was for someone she owed everything to. The three of us ate at the kitchen table. An odd little family created by circumstances none of us planned. At one point Jonah looked at Thaddeus. So, you're my father. The words hung awkwardly in the air. Thaddeus nodded slowly. Guess I am. Jonah laughed softly. That's weird to say at 45. Thaddeus smiled sadly. It's weird to hear at 78. They both laughed, and the sound felt warm. I watched them and felt something settle inside me. Life doesn't always give us timing we expect. But sometimes it gives us second chances anyway. Later, after Jonah left, I walked outside alone. The stars were bright above the ranch. The air smelled like grass and memory. I thought about all the pain that led here. The midnight porch. The secrets. The fear. And yet, somehow, I felt grateful. Not because things were perfect, but because truth had finally arrived. Thaddeus joined me quietly. You okay? He nodded. Think so. He hesitated. Loan. I don't want to pressure you. But if you decide to live here, I'd like to stay with you. If you'll have me. I looked at him carefully. The old hurt was still there, but softer now. I don't know what our marriage looks like after all this, I said honestly. He nodded. Understand. But I don't want to walk away yet, I added. Relief crossed his face. That's enough for me. We stood together watching the sky. The next morning I walked through the barn. Old tools hung on the walls. Dust covered everything. I imagined restoring it, turning it into something alive again. And suddenly I knew what I wanted. Call Jonah. I'm keeping the ranch, I said. He laughed. I was hoping you would. Smiled. I want it to be a place where people can start over. Maybe a retreat. Maybe a community space for seniors who don't want to feel forgotten. That sounds like something Mom would have loved, he said softly. His words warmed me. That evening, as we sat on the porch, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Oh. But just as the sun dipped below the horizon, a car pulled up the long dirt driveway. A woman stepped out, holding a folder. She approached cautiously. Excuse me, she said. Are you Eloan Briarwood? He nodded. She smiled politely. My name is Renee Harlow. I'm a journalist. I've been researching the Briarwood land dispute from the 70s. My stomach tightened. Land dispute. She opened the folder. There's evidence that someone intentionally hid the ownership records decades ago. And your name keeps coming up. I exchanged a glance with Thaddeus. What are you saying? I asked carefully. She took a breath. I think someone may have tried to steal this ranch from you a long time ago. And Maris Bellamy might have been protecting you from more than just a mistake. The wind suddenly felt colder. Because if she was right, then Maris's secrets were not just about guilt. They were about danger. And the truth we thought we had finally reached was only.
Thank you everyone for listening to my channel. And that is the end of Eloan's story. A reminder that even the quickest heart can carry the strong ending.